This is Topline Hotline with your hosts AJ Bruno, Asad Zaman, and me, Sam Jacobs, where we answer questions from the go-to-market community every week. Whoa, here she comes. Watch out, boys, she'll chew you up. Whoa, here she comes. She's a GTM eater. Whoa, here she comes. Watch out, boys, she'll chew you up. Welcome to Topline Hotline. It's a GTM conversation. It's GTM topics, Topline Hotline. Asad Zaman, AJ Bruno, Sam Jacobs, CEOs, three of us. We all identify as men, and Asad lives in Toronto, AJ lives outside Philly, and I live in New York City.
We teach Asad all of the Americanisms. That's what we figured out. He's learning so much about American culture.
AJ and Asad are in their 30s. I'm in my 40s. They're youngsters and more successful than me at that age. And for that reason, I don't like them. But I do a show with them every week.
I only have 8 more months until 8 more months, and then I turn the vaunted 40.
Seriously?
June, yeah.
Wow.
I think that's 8 months. When you get up there, you start to lose.
You've done a lot by 40. You've done a good job.
I've done okay.
Both of you.
Done some things.
I'm bad.
You're a little pisher, Asad.
Yeah.
You're a little guy.
Sam, is this your question, or we got Asad?
I'll ask the question. This is from the bowels of the Pavilion Slack and the go-to-market community, and really the Topline Slack community. Here's the question. Dear AJ, Asad, and Sam, I'm starting to think about 2025 planning. I know that Sam talks a lot about this concept of profitable, efficient growth. And I also know that in 2024, we moderated our growth expectations coming out of a very difficult 2023. So here's my question. As we think about planning for 2025, how do we set the right growth target, particularly if we have venture capital investors on our cap table that are expecting us to drive towards some kind of revenue growth multiple that will get closer, if not equal, their valuation at the time of their investment? So are you thinking about leaning in heavily? Are you thinking about continuing on the same trajectory? And how do you think about making investments against 2025? And what is your prognosis for what 2025 will look like from a global macroeconomic perspective? Asad.
I'll do the macro, but I'll leave my thoughts on the other thing too. I think that 2025 is shaping up to be a good year. It shows signals that it can be a positive environment to do business in for a larger subset of companies than 2023 was, and maybe even 2024 has been. And I think the reasons I feel that way is that interest rates are going to start declining come September in the US. They've already been declining in other markets. I think the fundamental economy, while showing signs of weakness, which is why they're going to reduce the interest rates, is still a good economy. Like I don't think this falls into a recession. I could be wrong, but I don't think that this is going to be a very hard landing. So I think the market was supposed to cool down. That's what they were doing. It's showing signs that it got cooled down, and now they're going to start addressing interest rates, which basically reduces the cost of capital, which is an incentive to invest, which then puts everyone in a mindset to spend and buy. And I think that's a good environment to do business in, and it'll feel a lot better once the rates are declining than when they were going up, obviously, but also compared to when they were flat, which is how they've been for some time. So I think just from a macro perspective, 2025 should be a favorable market compared to the last 2 or 3 years. Again, we're not going back to 2020. We're not going back to 2021. But will it feel a little bit like 2019? Maybe. Like 2019 vibes is kind of what I think people should expect. And so that allows you to, if you feel that way, if you're not the pessimist who thinks this is all going to fall apart, then it allows you to be a little bit more I don't want to use the word aggressive. I think just on the front foot with how you're thinking. Like if a lot of the planning that happened in 2022 for 2023 and then in 2023 for 2024 was risk minimization, then I think this is now the market where you kind of switch that towards, I think there's growth to be had, But let's be very thoughtful about how we want to do that. For my business, which isn't a venture funded business, the way I'm thinking about it is that we're in the more and better phase. Like sometimes you're in the phase in business where you're strategizing and coming up with new things and running a bunch of experiments. And sometimes I think you're in the execution phase where it's more and better. We need to do the things we're doing, just more of them and better. And so that's a lot of the focus that we're going to have for the first 6 months of the year. And we're going to be very diligent, as we have been for the last 2 or 3 years, around adjusting our way of thinking if some data shows up in our KPIs, in our leading indicators, or externally that gives us cause for concern, or to be more bullish. So I think the other part is plans have to be more flexible. This is not written in stone. Think of plans as written in pencil with an eraser close by. You can adjust if you need to. So those are some general thoughts. AJ, what do you think?
Well, I'll look at the micro, which means just like the tactical if you're evaluating your own business. And I'll just ask some questions out loud that you should think about. What's your retention? Is your headcount, is it growing? Is it on the decline? Is it stagnant? Are you set up to grow at a major way? Momentum? How about signals from your board? The burn rate, is your board going to be okay? The TAM of your business, have you hit a ceiling? Is there really a lot of headroom in your product? Are you multi-product? Are there inflection points? But the big one where I am a little bit more bearish on 2025 is CAC. And what CAC is telling us is that we need to be careful and that there's a yellow sign and that CAC has not come down. And so you're going to end up, if you were like bullish, you're like all signs say green, you answered those questions, you're going to be spending a lot of money to acquire customers. So the rest of the business must be healthy.
AJ, that's a really sharp point. So is what you're saying that if everybody is going to be more aggressive in 2025, then let's say Google Ads, more people are bidding, so the cost per bid went up, right? Like if we're trying outbound, more people are investing in it, so breaking through becomes harder. So is the CAC going up because more people are bullish? So CAC kind of goes up as the market improves. Is that the trend you are highlighting?
That's part of it, but I think the CAC is still an experimentation. As we just talked about in the most recent episode, we talked about influencer-led growth as a channel. That's something when 2 years ago you would never talk about in a B2B SaaS business.
Yeah.
And so we're just confused and challenged. And when you're confused and challenged, you tend to spend money in areas where they're not, you see signals and leading indicators. And so I would just be careful with your marketing leaders or even your sales team of putting dollars where you don't have predictable revenue. So as we talked about, just go hire a RevOps leader and that will solve it. I'm just kidding. But like, I think CAC is something that I'm watching carefully and watching both at the public market and what I'm hearing from my friends' companies.
It's also so hard to see good benchmarks, right? Like I look at these reports all the time and it's like everybody has different numbers for what top quartile growth is, what CAC is across various stages. One of the things I'm doing for the newsletter is take all these reports and basically aggregate them and see where do we land up. That's a better indication of what the market is saying than like any one of their individual reports because the data set is so constrained. Sam, what are your thoughts on this?
I like what AJ said a lot. I like what you said too. I like this idea of like being on the front foot, but more and better versus wildly new. The way I'm thinking about it is more and better, but I guess a couple of themes. The first is this year was a year of profitable stability for us, and next year I want it to be a year of moderated growth. So I want to grow next year. Not a ton, and not necessarily by adding more people to the community, but by continuing to improve retention, continuing to improve the value proposition for the community, continuing to invest in chapters. That's foundational. And that'll give us probably 15, maybe 20% top line growth. And then the question is, are there new vectors of growth? But the only thing I want to make sure of is, am I staffing them? Because I just think it's like in the past, you're like, we're going to grow this way and I'm going to hire one person to do it. It's like, if you plan on a new vector of growth, you need to invest against that vector. And you need, and to do that, you need the time horizon like there's one idea that I have that I want to work on, but I even realized as I described it, like the right way to do it means that it won't have any impact at all in 2025, and that it's really a 2026 growth vector. And so I think it comes down for me to more and better, like you said, and to really trying to be thoughtful, which is sort of AJ's point about watching CAC. And it's saying, hey, I'm not going to go from like 3 people working on something to 15 people working on something like I used to do in 2021 or 2022. It's about targeted specific investments and tranched investments, meaning I'm going to put in a little bit of money, see what comes back. And that means that all of it will take a little bit longer than if I wanted to be like, all right, 2025 is the year that we grow 60%. It's like, I don't think that's going to be what happens. But I do want to grow a little bit more. I want to have the team understand that good in 2025 is a higher bar than good in 2024. We're meeting the bar in 2024, and we've done what we set out to do, and we're beating our targets, and that's great. But I expect more from all of us, but I also don't expect it to be free. And what I mean by that is, so we got to hire, we got to invest a little bit. So we'll probably, we didn't hire, I don't think net new headcount we have hired anybody in 2024. And I think we'll probably add 5 people in 2025, maybe 6, which for us is 10% growth in headcount, 15% growth in headcount. And I'm going to expect something from that. And so that's, and so if we perform the way we did in 2025 and 2024, I'll be pretty disappointed. And I think we can do better than that. And I think that just means continuing to raise the bar. But I don't want to make the same mistakes that I've made in previous years. So
I think it's one of the hard parts of this job is as you work through cycles, it's like switching your mindset and how you think about things, because what was the right way to think for the last 2 years, if you just keep that hat on, it's the wrong hat. So you have to change it a little bit, but you're not changing it completely fundamentally. So it's actually a needle to thread that's very hard. Last question on this is, but boards have their own thoughts. And so what do you do when boards are pressuring lots of growth or like pressuring something that you don't think is realistically possible? Is that, AJ, what are your thoughts on that? You're the venture funded.
So it's funny. I was looking back
does that even happen though? Like, is that just things people say? But does a board ever force a company to grow more than the CEO thinks is possible?
I mean, the board in a founder's or CEO's mind, definite. If they have a 51% ownership, absolutely, they control the keys, tell you exactly what to do. But if they don't have that, like, you should know your governance. That aside, I think the one thing that CEOs and founders get wrong is they feel like the board is telling them something, and the board is saying, no, you come up to me. And then like you start to spin. I've looked at, I've made this mistake many times where I'm like, well, what is I'm seeking? I'm trying to truth seek of what the board is looking for. And it feels like it's a moving target. But the reality is I come in and say, like, here's my position. Here are different options. This is the board's perspective. I would never say this to the company, but here are the different cost structures of the business. Here are the different trade-offs and the levers and the resources. Like, for the record, don't ever go to your company and say, like, you all are resources. Be very careful. Like, there's a board communication, there's a company communication. So I'm very clear about that. But if you like look at those and those trade-offs, and then you explain your position on it, they're probably they want to understand that it's defensible, and they're probably going to potentially nitpick at certain things, but ultimately the goal and the trend, as long as it's the right way, then they're going to get behind it. And if you feel that growth is the right way, then I think, and you're defensible about it and you have the data to support it, then they'll sign off on the plan. The other way is true too. It's also a emotional momentum feeling, and I still feel that venture is in where it was last year. It's still in a negative, bearish place. So I would be surprised, unless you're OpenAI or other NVIDIA or any other company that's in that space, I'd be surprised if any VC is like, yeah, you got to go all in right now.
Well, I think what I asked this question at the CEO dinner I was at last week. And I think it comes down to whatever we decide, we have to paint a very clear picture of it for our organizations.
Yep.
And say, like, this is where we're going. This is what it will feel like in 12 months. This is how we will know it'll be successful. And not just the financial metrics, but like, this is what our customers will be saying about us. Like, put it in your head. This is where we're going. I want everybody to understand this is where we're going. Because I think where the slippage happens and the thrash, to use AJ's word, is when it's unclear. And you maybe you set a revenue target, but you don't have an operational plan to support the revenue target. And so it's not quite clear like what any of it means. And so I think it's really, really important that you paint a very, very clear picture of like, this is what the future will feel like.
Yeah. And communicate it over and over and over again. That's the part that I find people miss. They have this one big meeting, they're really nicely articulated, and they think everybody heard and everybody remembers. It's like, actually, these things you have to just beat people over the head with for them to really understand and for them to grasp it. That's a really good point, Sam.
All right, folks. It's been Topline Hotline, another great episode. We're all going to be at GTM 2024 in Austin, Texas, October 14th through 16th. We hope to see you there. Get your tickets. Use the code TOPLINE for 15% off your ticket. And thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.